Assalamualaikum, I'm Anna A. Khalifa, last report from Group 10. My report is about positive and negative effects of colonialism in Africa. What are the positive and negative effects of colonialism in Africa? Oftentimes, people criticize colonialism, highlighting only the negative effects it had on Africa. The truth is that colonial rule did not just add negative impact. There are areas where it really contributed positively, and Africa is still enjoying some of those positive effects till today. One of those areas is the exposure to Western education. Today, Africa value enjoyed the benefits of the introduction of the Western education. We can now communicate with the people from other continents, join international organizations, and even enter into contract with the countries in the other continent just because of Western education. That notwithstanding, it does not override the fact that colonialism had the negative impacts too. In this article, we are going to cover both the positive and negative effects of the colonialism in Africa. I recommend that you read this very carefully because a lot will be said about colonial rule in general. After highlighting the positive and negative impacts of colonialism, I will give a final conclusion on whether colonialism was totally disastrous to Africa or not. Positive effect of colonialism in Africa. Introduction of the modern idea of governments. One of the major impacts of colonialism was the introduction of new government ideas, and this contributed positively in the many African countries. The influence of colonialism made Africans exhibit that structured kind of government which is colonial, made African colonials master practice during the time of colonialism. Take for instance the idea of the separation of the power, which helps to avoid conflicts between the arms of the governments, was a learning from the colonial master. Also, the ideas of a writing constitution was brought as a result of the colonialism. You can recall that before colonialism, most African countries had an unwritten constitution, and this posed a lot of problems. The concept of the right constitution therefore helps to reduce the work of the judicial arms of the government and the interpretation of the law. Creation of the large political unit. Another positive effect of the colonialism was the creation of the large political unit. This was advantageous because of help most African countries like Nigeria to grow faster before the coming of the colonial master to Africa. Most African countries had Hausa Fulani system of the administration. There was the Yoruba system, and even each other even thought the religious were not too far from themselves. Or on arrival, the colonial master merged all the political system to enable faster development in the regions and to make government easy for themselves. Three developments of the political parties. Before the coming of the colonialism, the concept of the political parties and the election was abstract in Africa. It was the colonialism that necessitated the creation of political parties and election, which has become the formal way of the choosing political leaders. The idea of the political parties came into palace due to the struggle for the independence, and indirectly it can be seen the colonialism actual caused the establishment of the political parties in Africa. In Nigeria, for the instance, political parties like INCNC, UPC, and NDP, and AG, etc., were established to stand against colonialism in the country. Introduction of money currency, trying by barter, was the only way of the transactions in transacting in the Africa until the introduction of the colonialism. The colonial masters introduced money, educated Africans on how the money currency could solve the problem of the trade by barter. In the 1912, the first silver coins were introduced by the British, and the West Africa Currency Board was a set up. Colonialism also introduced the banking system to Africa. Banks were created to keep money in. Africans really enjoying this development because of it solved a lot of problems with the trade by barter system. 5. Common contract bank. Colonialism in Africa also introduced a common contract bank in the French colony. Though this is which is the exception of the Guinan. The introduction of the central bank, which is supply all the French colonies and the same currency, helped to promote interstate trade among the colonies. 6. Development of the modern transport and the communication system. Maturity of the celebrated technologies that has the help to make a transportation easy. Nigeria and the other parts of the Africa were put in the place by the colonial master. Transportation system like railway, seaports, airways, routes, bridge, etc., with the used to solve the barrier to the movement and the colonies. 7. Common legal system. Another advantage to the colony in Africa in the common legal system, which was introduced by the British to all the colonies after the demise of the colonialism. This helped to build to build good relationship among Africa countries. To take, for instance, the common legal system in Africa allows for easy and the softer international transaction. More so, which is the coming of colonial, the larger system of Africa got a new shape. Punishment and form for churn, banishment, and sacrifices were taken away. 8. Development of the civil service. Colonialism truly shaped and the uniform the civil service in the Nigeria and the other parts of the Africa too. The colonial master made in such a way that the civil service will look just like theirs and will also favor them too. Negative effects of colonialism in Africa. 1. Economic dividends and the exploitation. In such mass that the colonialism brought development into Africa, it was also form of exploitation too. The idea of colonialism was introduced to make Africa before dependent on the colonial master. They took all the wealth and the resources of Africa to their own country. During that time of the colonialism, people were highly taxed by the colonialism master as to generate funds to make their plans of colonization successful. Coupled with that, the colonial master made sure that they were in charge of all the metropolitan industries, thus making Africans economically dependent on the colonizers. Number 2, created the problem of disunity. Another negative effect of the colonialism in the Africa was the disunity, which is the broad take for the instance in Nigeria today. Today it is argued that colonialism is responsible for the religious and tribal disunity in the country. This was a result of the merging of the of all the region in 1912 by Lord Logard. Accordingly, the different countries which is colonized Africa also caused disunity in the same way and divided Africa into French-speaking country and the English-speaking country, and that is one of the major problem of the Economic Commission of West Africa State ECOWAS. 3. Cultural imperialism. Chinua Achebe. Things Fall Apart has already said much on this from that book we called See How the Colonial Master treated African culture as a inferior and they are superior. This regarded Africa culture change anything that was in their favor and made gullible African to see the new culture as the best. The local languages of Africa really choose to see the new culture as the best. The local languages of Africa religious, name, education, dress, music, sport, etc. will apply with foreign ones. For high level of slave trade, deportation, and humanization of Africans. With the introduction of the colonialism, the idea of slave trade was introduced in Africa. In fact, it was actually practiced by the colonial master because they were the ones in need of slaves. Then, this negative effect of colonialism reduced the number of able-bodied men in Africa. Also, colonialism reduced the precedence that was given to many African leaders. The colonial master literally controlled the leader through threat and the humiliation. Leaders who failed to follow the rules of the colonial master were deported and sometimes killed. Take for instance Oberon was deported in 1896 after the Berlin Massacre and later died in exile. 5. Alienation of people from the government. Before the inception of the colonialism, Africa had a type of political system where everybody took part in the political decision making of their state. But when the colonial master introduced their own system of government, a lot of Africans were not longer allowed to participate in the political decision making of their nation. This was one of the causes of the Aba Woman Riot of 1929. Since the traditional rulers were made the subordinate to foreign officials, the alienation from the government was really a problem to the people. This was the alienation from government was really a problem to the people. This was the case in the Africa until some educated Nigerian nationalists started to the English the people and oppose the government. 6. Poor education system. Apparently, the system of the government introduced by colonial master to the Africa was as good as foreign education system. It was physically to enable Africa learn how to read and write the languages of the colonial master. Intentional, the colonial master neglected things like technical, vocational, and scientific studies so as to restrict the knowledge of the African and to make themselves as superior to Africans. Yun lamang po. Maraming salamat.